All women are different, but they are all women. This video is androcentric from a men's point of view and is presented as opinion, commentary, and debate. Expressing opinions is not violence. These are ideas to challenge, question, and argue in public, because classical liberalism relies on the First Amendment for its dialectic. If you are a feminist, then consider this. If patriarchy truly existed as claimed, feminism could not. And if all men are trash and women are equal to men, then what are we to conclude? Women will die for their children. Men will die for their wives and children, and God chose to die for all mankind. Authority rolls up with responsibility. If this framing of facts offends you, click off to a cute cat video. Proceeding further will expose you to gamma bias and criticism directed at ideas, claims, institutions, not at any individual's virtue or dignity. Our method follows the 7 liberal arts, the trivium, grammar, logic, rhetoric, and the quadrivium, arithmetic, geometry, music, and astronomy, and the transcendentals, the good, true, and beautiful. If this framework is not for you, feel free to exit now. It's no disgrace. Women are wonderful. God bless America. Men are great. Feminismus delendis est. HR Struggle Sessions, Karen's Cultural Revolution Enforcing Feminization and Communism in Corporations, written by Conrad Riker, available now. Links in description. HR Struggle Sessions, a field guide for men who still notice reality. The chastity belt, she buckled herself. She downloaded the app, she tracked her cycle, she had 2 abortions, she carved up a man at dinner. And she's absolutely certain every bit of it is your fault. Picture a woman in 14th century Bohemia. Her husband rides off to war, and before departing, he summons the village blacksmith, a man with hands like cured ham, who fits her with an iron device weighing 7 pounds, padlocked at the hip, covering her sex so completely that intercourse becomes physically impossible. She did not request this device. She cannot remove it. The key rides away with a man who may return in 18 months or may die outside Prague and leave her locked in metal until a locksmith or death sets her free. That was a chastity belt. Coercion, steel, captivity, an external agent imposing his will upon a female body by physical force. Now picture a 28-year-old in Brooklyn downloading a free application called Flow onto her iPhone 15 Pro, tapping agree on terms of service she will never read, entering her own basal body temperature with her own thumb every morning before her oat milk latte, and then publishing 3,000 words in a literary magazine about how she has been imprisoned. One woman was locked in iron by a man who held the key. The other locked herself in with her own thumbprint and then wrote an essay blaming the locksmith. If you cannot distinguish between these 2 situations, you have lost the capacity to distinguish freedom from tyranny, and you have lost it in the precise direction that flatters your grievance. I have read Cyborg Chastity so that you do not have to, and I can report that it contains, in roughly equal measure, 1 false analogy stretched past its screaming point, 2 abortions reframed as political sacraments, 1 dinner party where a man asks an innocent question and is ritually humiliated for failing to recite feminist orthodoxy on command, and approximately 0 valid syllogisms. What it does not contain is a single true claim about the relationship between voluntary consumer behavior and actual coercion, because no such true claim exists. She downloaded an app. The app did what apps do. She calls this surveillance infrastructure. I call it Tuesday. She calls it cyborg chastity. I call it a woman who cannot tell the difference between her own choices and her own oppression, a distinction Aristotle resolved 23 centuries ago in the Nicomachean Ethics, when he separated voluntary action from coerced action, a text apparently not on the syllabus during her gender studies doctorate. Here is what actual surveillance infrastructure looks like. A father in family court watching a judge award primary custody of his children to a woman credibly accused of physical abuse. Because the court operates under the Duluth model, a framework designed by feminists to presume male perpetration and female victimhood in every domestic dispute regardless of evidence. Actual surveillance is the 63% sentencing discount women receive compared to men for identical crimes, documented across every Western jurisdiction that collects the data. Actual surveillance is the male suicide rate, nearly 4 times the female rate in every developed nation, which her essay does not mention, cannot mention, because acknowledging male suffering would collapse the Manichaean framework upon which her entire worldview depends. Every man falsely accused, every father separated from his children by a court system treating him as an ATM with legs. Every teenage boy told by his university that he constitutes an oppressor class by virtue of his chromosomes. These are the products of institutional power asymmetry. A push notification that says, "You're doing great, Queen," is not one of them. What follows in this essay is a dissection not merely of one article, but of the entire psychological and rhetorical apparatus that produces articles like it. I will show you how the dinner party scene functions as inquisition rather than dialogue, a woman extracting male submission and branding its solidarity. I will show you how 2 abortions become not private grief requiring honest reflection, but fuel for ideological possession. How a woman who writes, "The world had not earned my motherhood," is not liberated, but solipsistic, declaring the universe unworthy of her reproductive generosity as though her womb were the Ark of the Covenant, and the rest of us unworthy temple servants. And I will show you this using nothing but the tools your civilization bequeathed to you: definition, syllogism, rhetoric, the trivium that built the universities she attended and forgot to learn from. The truth is not complicated. A free app is not an iron belt. A dinner party is not a struggle session. An abortion is not a political act. And a woman who chooses every step of her own path and then calls herself a prisoner has not been oppressed by men. She has been imprisoned by her own refusal to accept the consequences of her own agency. The key to her cell has been in her hand the entire time. She prefers to write essays blaming the lock. Bunkum article by a feminist, PhD, Seaborg Chastity, when the patriarchy tracks your period. Fertility apps, dinner party lies, and the crossbody bag that carries our compliance every morning before my feet touch the hardwood. Before the espresso machine growls its mechanical sympathy with my waking into a world structured to disappear me, I open the app flow clue. Ovia Natural Cycles. The names are sedatives, soft, rounded, feminine little words for the steel trap of algorithmic surveillance, cinched around my reproductive organs like a digital chastity belt, whose keys are held by men who have never once bled. My phone lives in the crossbody bag. Black leather, brass hardware, slammed against my left hip like a second womb carrying my second self. The digital me, the me that lives on server farms. The me that menstruates in spreadsheets, that ovulates in quarterly earnings reports, whose fertility window is calculated by algorithms written by tech bros named Chase and Bryce, who think natural cycle is something you do on a mountain bike. I input my temperature, my mucus, my mood, which lives permanently at some frequency of furious. The app congratulates me for staying on top of my health with the same cloying tone a Victorian father used praising his daughter for keeping her knees together at a dance. Good girl, good data. Good little data set. And where does it go? Who cradles my cycle in their corporate palms? Fertility tracking is a 4.2 billion industry. 78% of users are women 18 to 35. The data collected: sexual activity, contraceptive use, miscarriages, abortions, libido, cramping intensity is shared with third-party advertisers, data brokers, and in Flo's case, was found by the Wall Street Journal to be shipping intimate user data directly to Facebook, Google, and Flurry Analytics. Your period is not your period. Your period is a product. Your cramps are content. Your ovulation is optimized for ad delivery. I call it cyborg chastity. The concept is simple, even if the machinery isn't. The chastity belts of medieval mythology and the purity rings of contemporary evangelical pathology function to control women's sexuality through physical restraint and male key holding. Fertility tracking apps function to control women through data extraction and algorithmic governance. The chastity belt said, "Your body belongs to the man who holds the key." The fertility app says, "Your body belongs to the algorithm that knows you better than you know yourself." The belt was iron. The app is code. Both are patriarchal infrastructure designed to extract, monitor, and profit from women's reproductive capacity while disguising extraction as empowerment, knowledge, and choice. You think you're liberating yourself by tracking. You think knowledge is power and data is autonomy, but whose knowledge, whose power, whose servers are your ovaries stored on? Last Saturday, I attended a dinner party at the home of a woman I'll call Sierra, because that's her actual name, and she deserves to be associated with this account. Sierra practices what she calls intentional hospitality, which as far as I can determine, means serving charred fennel and quoting Brené Brown, while her golden retriever performs cunnilingus on the charcuterie board. Across from me, a man I'll call Theodore, because I'd rather not remember his real name. Theodore worked in venture capital, which is finance's word for wealth extraction with better branding. He had that particular confidence that comes from never having been told to sit down and listen in his entire privileged fucking life. Between the main course, a grain bowl that performed the concept of sustenance without providing it, and dessert, a pistachio cake I suspect was performing irony, Theodore asked what I thought about the whole period tracking app privacy thing. He had read an article. He had thoughts. I think it's fascinating, he said, swirling organic wine that cost more than my first car. The quantified self movement. People want to optimize everything. People, he said people, as if the quantified self isn't overwhelmingly the quantified female self. As if menstruation tracking is a lifestyle choice rather than a biological reality mined by industries that would legislate my uterus into a state-regulated Airbnb if they could. Theodore, I said, with the kind of calm that contains weather, do you understand that what you're describing is patriarchal surveillance infrastructure disguised as wellness culture? He blinked. I mean, I think it's more nuanced than it isn't. The data collection, sure, that's a concern, but I think the apps also give women valuable information about their women don't need apps to give them information about their bodies. Women need apps to stop stealing information from their bodies. But if you choose to download the app, I set down my fork. The clink was small and surgical. So you're saying that because I engage with the technology under conditions of radical informational asymmetry designed by an industry with documented histories of data abuse, marketed to me through targeted advertising that exploits my biological vulnerabilities, I'm consenting to surveillance? I'm saying there's a choice involved. Theo, is consent valid when the conditions of consent are manufactured? He looked at me like I'd asked him to explain water. I think that's complicated. It isn't. Sierra suggested we move to the living room for coffee. Nobody had finished their grain bowls. Theodore spent the rest of the evening talking to a woman named Kelsey, who laughed at everything he said with the committed enthusiasm of someone who had already decided to fuck him and was now just auditioning the foreplay. I watched him perform allyship like a zoo animal doing tricks for pellets. Theodore wasn't interested in understanding cyborg chastity. Theodore was interested in appearing interested in feminist discourse because appearing interested in feminist discourse is the new personality for men who want to sleep with women who have opinions without holding any themselves. He'd leave that party feeling enlightened. He'd had a great conversation. He'd learned so much. He'd go home feeling like a good man because a woman with a gender studies PhD had dissected him at a dinner table and he had taken it. Or rather, he had waited for me to stop talking. That's what men do. They wait. They wait for you to finish being angry so they can resume being comfortable. They treat your rage like weather, something to be endured on the way to the weekend, not something that requires them to change. I was not always this. There was a version of me before the fury, before the framework, before the crossbody bag and the apps and the dinner parties where I carved men like Theodore into conversational Felice. She was 19. She was sitting in a clinic bathroom staring at a plastic cup of her own urine, calculating whether she could raise a child on work study and a Pell Grant. She could not. The first abortion was clinical, efficient, emotionally inert, in the way that trauma often costumes itself in the moment. The nurses were kind. The doctor was professional. The waiting room offered a water cooler and magazines featuring celebrities who had achieved the body I was currently emptying. I went home, I ate saltines. I did not cry because there was nothing to cry about. I had made a choice. The choice was rational. The world had not earned my motherhood. The world did not deserve it. The second abortion, 14 months later, was less inert. Not because of the procedure. The procedure was identical. medical, as routine as a dental cleaning, but because of the man. A graduate student in philosophy who had opinions about Heidegger and commitment in equal measure, which is to say he had opinions about Heidegger. He told me he loved me in the way men tell you they love you as negotiation. As a key, they expect to open something. As a temporary visa, they can revoke when the territory becomes inconvenient. When I told him I was pregnant, he said, "What do you want to do about it? What do you want to do about it?" The grammar of abandonment dressed in the syntax of choice. He was asking me to absolve him. He was asking me to decide so he could pretend no decision had occurred. He was asking me to carry both the procedure and the responsibility, so he could carry nothing at all but his copy of being and time and his performance of sensitivity. I told him I'd handle it. I handled it. He said, "Let me know if you need anything." He meant, "Let me know when it's over so I can stop performing care." I never spoke to him again. Not because I was wounded. I refuse that frame. I reject that narrative. I will not be the discarded woman mourning a man who was never more than a philosophical argument with a pulse, but because I understood, in that clinic with those fluorescent lights and that particular species of institutional silence, that the personal was not political as metaphor. The personal was political as architecture. My uterus was territory. My fertility was resource. My choices were constrained by systems I had been taught to experience as weather, natural, inevitable, outside human intervention. The systems were not weather, the systems were men. Men like Theodore with their venture capital and their performative curiosity. Men like the philosopher with their ontology and their exit strategies. Men who built the apps and funded the apps and harvested the data, and then sat across from me at dinner parties asking what I thought about the whole period tracking thing. As though it were an intellectual exercise and not the digital colonization of my reproductive system. Cyborg chastity. Say it until it sounds like what it is. The medieval lord locked the belt. The tech CEO locks the algorithm. The key is the same shape. The material has changed. Consider, following the Dobbs decision, prosecutors in multiple states sought menstrual data from period tracking apps to build cases against women suspected of terminating pregnancies. The data you input to understand your cycle became evidence. Your fertility window became a prosecution window. Your basal body temperature became probable cause. Cyborg chastity is not metaphor. It is not theory. It is legal infrastructure. It is the surveillance state wearing the mask of self-care and speaking in the language of empowerment. The genius of cyborg chastity is this. It makes the prisoner administer her own surveillance. It makes the tracked body grateful for the tracking. It transforms surveillance into empowerment, extraction into knowledge, patriarchal control into feminist praxis, and it accomplishes all of this with a pastel interface and push notifications that say things like, "You're doing great, Queen. We have always been cyborgs, as Donna Haraway taught us, but never by choice." The cyborg that Haraway celebrated was a creature of possibility, of boundary dissolution, of subversive potential. The cyborg of fertility tracking is something else entirely. It is a cyborg of extraction, a cyborg whose body produces data as labor, whose reproductive system functions as content farm, whose most intimate biological rhythms are harvested and sold by corporations that see her not as subject, but as resource. You think you choose the app, you think the choice is free, but the choice is structured by the system that profits from it. Consent manufactured under conditions of informational inequality is not consent. It is compliance wearing the language of agency. It is the chastity belt clicking shut, rebranded as liberation. And you are the one turning the key. I carry all of this in the crossbody bag. The phone, the keys. The rage that has replaced whatever softer emotion I might once have been capable of. The bag is armor and archive both. It holds what I need to survive and what I need to remember, that my body is occupied territory, that my data is the currency of my own subjugation, and that every morning when I open the app, I am simultaneously the prisoner and the guard. This is not contradiction. This is condition. To the Theodores of the world, your curiosity is not allyship. Your questions are not solidarity. Your presence at the dinner party is not resistance. You want to help? Stop asking women to explain their oppression for your consumption. Stop treating our fury like a topic for debate. Stop sitting across from us with your organic wine and your reasonable tone and your performance of nuance while the systems you fund and profit from and refuse to dismantle continue to extract from our bodies the data of our own subjugation. Your interest is extraction. Your questions are mining operations. Your nuance is the sound of a lock clicking shut. And to the women who input their temperatures and their mucus and their moods into applications owned by corporations that regard them as data points, I am not asking you to delete your apps. I am not asking you to retreat into ignorance. I am asking you to understand that the tool you have been handed is not neutral, that the tracking is not liberation, that the data is not yours, and that the sense of control you feel when the app predicts your ovulation is not power. It is the feeling of the belt closing around your waist, rebranded as freedom, resold as choice, delivered to your hip in a crossbody bag you carry everywhere, never realizing the bag is also carrying you, my sickle, my data, my revolution, but only if we seize the means of its production. Otherwise, it's just another chastity belt with better marketing, and we are the ones locking ourselves in. The chastity of choice, or how feminism reframes voluntary app usage as patriarchal imprisonment. Consider what our dinner party philosopher is actually asserting. She downloaded an application. She typed information into it. She did this voluntarily, repeatedly, daily, with her own fingers on a device she purchased through an internet connection she pays for. The application then did what every free application on earth does. It harvested data to sell to advertisers because that is the business model. This is not gendered. This is not patriarchal. This is how the entire digital economy functions. Your smartwatch sells your heart rate data. Your Maps application sells your location data. Your grocery store loyalty card sells your purchasing data. Men's health data, fitness data, location data, sexual performance data, collected by apps like Hims and Roman and MyFitnessPal, commodified and sold identically. But you will never read a 3,000-word essay about cyborg circumcision because a man's step counter shared his walking habits with Google. The empathy gap is so vast you could park an aircraft carrier in it and still have room for the escort vessels. Now let us examine the word at the center of this carnival of dishonesty, chastity. The Latin castus means pure, cut off, religiously devoted. A chastity belt in the popular imagination was an iron device locked onto a woman's body by a departing crusader to prevent sexual intercourse during his absence. The woman could not remove it. She did not choose it. It was welded to her flesh by external force. Contrast this with a fertility tracking application, software that a woman downloads freely from an app store, opens with a tap of her finger, inputs data she selects, and can delete at any moment with 2 touches. To equate these two things requires either a categorical failure of mind, so total that the speaker cannot distinguish between iron locked by force and software opened by choice, or more likely a deliberate rhetorical fraud designed to generate maximum emotional yield from minimum factual substrate. Aristotle identified this error 23 centuries ago, the confusion of substance and accident. The app and the belt share no substance. They share no form, they share no causal structure. They are accidents of a vaguely similar theme. Female reproductive capacity welded together by a metaphor that collapses the moment you breathe on it. This is not argument. This is the forensic equivalent of painting a moustache on a mannequin and calling it your husband. The historical reality of chastity belts is itself a catastrophe for the feminist narrative. The Victoria and Albert Museum in London, which possesses one of the finest collections of medieval artifacts on earth, has declared the chastity belt a myth. The few existing specimens that tourists gawk at in museums across Europe have been dated by metallurgists and conservators to the 18th and 19th centuries, fabrications created to titillate Victorian society. Not medieval women? The British Museum has stated that there is no credible evidence chastity belts were ever used in the Middle Ages for their purported purpose. The entire iconography, the knight locking his wife in iron before riding to Jerusalem, is a Victorian invention, which means our writer has chosen as her central metaphor a device that never existed in the form she describes, fabricated by the patriarchal culture she claims to oppose, in order to frame a voluntary software download as the moral equivalent of something that didn't happen. You could not design a more perfect illustration of feminist epistemology. A myth about a myth used to generate outrage about a phone application. It is turtles all the way down, and every turtle is imaginary. Now consider the gamma bias operating beneath the surface of every sentence. Gamma bias, as the researchers Denoff and Wakefield have demonstrated, is the self-concealing cognitive framework that amplifies female victimhood while rendering male experience invisible. It has three components, and every single one operates at full throttle in this essay. First, the women are wonderful effect. The female users of fertility apps are presented as innocent lambs, good girls, good datasets, exploited by predatory male coders named Chase and Bryce. The women have no agency, no culpability, no responsibility for their own choices. They are pure victims. Second, the empathy gap, the possibility that men face identical or worse surveillance capitalism, and men do. As every man who has been served advertisements for hair loss treatments within hours of privately searching for information about prostate health can attest, is not merely dismissed. It is invisible. It does not exist. The essay contains no acknowledgement that data harvesting is a universal phenomenon, because acknowledging it would destroy the gendered grievance. Third, the systematic sexism framing. Universal corporate data practices, which affect every human with a smartphone, are reframed as targeted misogynistic oppression. A profit-motivated business model becomes patriarchal infrastructure designed to extract, monitor, and profit from women's reproductive capacity. The words designed to do enormous work here, they impute intention, motive, and malice, where none exists. The tech company does not care about your ovaries. The tech company cares about your data, because your data can be sold. Your ovaries are incidental to the transaction. The tech company would harvest data from a toaster if the toaster had a menstrual cycle and clicked on advertisements. Let us now perform a disjunctive syllogism on the writer's central claim about manufactured consent. She asserts that consent to use the app is invalid because it is manufactured under conditions of radical informational asymmetry. Very well. Either women possess sufficient rational agency to make consequential decisions about technology, or they do not. If they do possess such agency, then downloading and using a fertility tracking app is a valid choice, and her entire framework collapses. If they do not possess such agency, if they are so thoroughly manipulated by algorithms, marketing, and patriarchal infrastructure that they cannot recognize their own subjugation, then they cannot meaningfully consent to anything. They cannot consent to feminist ideology, they cannot consent to political positions. They cannot consent to her own argument because they are, by her own framework, cognitive puppets dangling on strings held by systems they cannot perceive. The feminist asserts women are strong, independent, and capable of dismantling patriarchal systems, while simultaneously asserting those same women are so cognitively helpless, they cannot recognize that a free app is selling their data. She cannot have both. She cannot be subject and object, agent and dupe, revolutionary and prisoner. Unless, of course, she selectively invokes whichever framing produces maximum grievance yield in any given paragraph, which is precisely what she does with the shameless flexibility of a career contortionist. Observe the irreducible contradiction at the heart of this performance. The writer tells us she had 2 abortions. She describes the first as rational, a choice. She describes the second with equal clarity of agency, I handled it. She declares she was not wounded, rejects that frame, will not be the discarded woman. She is, by her own account, a woman of formidable intellect and iron will, a gender studies PhD who carves men into conversational felice at dinner parties, a warrior who has stared down the patriarchy, with a fork in her hand and organic wine in her glass. Yet this same paragon of strength and autonomy also expects us to believe she is so thoroughly manipulated by an app on her phone that she is simultaneously the prisoner and the guard, which is she. Is she the sovereign agent who made rational choices about her pregnancies? Or is she the helpless victim of algorithmic governance who cannot recognize her own subjugation? She cannot be both. The law of non-contradiction, the foundation of all rational thought, the principle Aristotle placed before every other, forbids it. A thing cannot be A and not A in the same respect at the same time. Yet, the feminist apparatus requires precisely this impossibility. Women must be strong enough to dismantle civilization, but weak enough to be victimized by a fertility app. The contradiction is not a bug. The contradiction is the feature. It is the engine of perpetual grievance. It is the perpetual motion machine of victim politics. And now consider the word she weaponizes without understanding: patriarchy. From the Greek pater, father and archin, to rule, the rule of fathers. The word has undergone what the philosopher James Lindsay would call semantic inflation, the deliberate expansion of a term's meaning until it encompasses everything and signifies nothing. In her usage, patriarchy means any system that produces outcomes feminists dislike. A tech company builds a fertility app because women want to track their cycles and investors want to profit from data. Patriarchy. Men design the algorithm. Patriarchy. Women voluntarily download the app. Still patriarchy, because the choice itself is manufactured. The word has been inflated past the point of meaning. It is a theological term, an article of faith, a demon name to be invoked when argument fails. And like all theological terms deployed by people who reject theology, it functions as a thought-terminating cliché. Say patriarchy and you need not explain motives, demonstrate intentions, or prove mechanisms. Say patriarchy and every male action becomes evidence of conspiracy, every female action becomes evidence of victimhood, and every neutral market transaction becomes an episode in the endless saga of patriarchal reproductive control. It is unfalsifiable, which means it is not a theory. It is a religion without a god, which is to say it is exactly what it claims to oppose. The trivium, grammar, logic, rhetoric, is the ancient instrument of the West for distinguishing truth from sophistry, and it dismembers this essay with the clinical efficiency of a skilled anatomist. Grammar first, fix the definitions. Chastity does not mean voluntary software usage. Surveillance does not mean data you freely provided to a service you chose to use. Consent does not become invalid because you did not read the terms of service. If it did, every contract signed by every human in the digital age would be void, and civilization would collapse into a puddle of litigation. Patriarchy does not mean profit-motivated technology companies building products for a female user base. Logic second, the central syllogism of the essay fails at every joint. Major premise, patriarchal systems control women's bodies. Minor premise, fertility apps exist. Conclusion, fertility apps are patriarchal control. This is the formal fallacy of the undistributed middle. A textbook error a first-year logic student would be embarrassed to commit. Apps existing does not make them patriarchal. Data being harvested does not make it gendered oppression. The conclusion does not follow from the premises. Rhetoric third, the essay's persuasive power derives entirely from emotional manipulation, the abortion narratives, the dinner party humiliation, the snide caricature of Theodore, the performing cunnilingus on the charcuterie board line that exists solely to generate disgust. Strip away the pathos and what remains? A woman downloaded an app, the app did what apps do, and she is angry about it. This is not systemic analysis. This is a consumer complaint dressed in academic language and paraded through the streets as political philosophy. I knew a man, a software engineer, quiet, diligent, the kind of man who builds the infrastructure everyone uses and no one thanks, who discovered that his fitness tracker was sharing his heart rate data with his health insurance company. His premiums went up. He was being penalized through algorithmic surveillance for elevated stress levels caused by working 60-hour weeks to pay a mortgage and child support for children. The family courts had decided he could see twice a month. There is no word for what happened to him. There is no feminist framework to describe it. There is no dinner party where women lean forward with organic wine and ask thoughtful questions about his oppression. He is invisible. He is data. He is a line item on a spreadsheet, just like the woman with the fertility app. Except no one is comparing his situation to a medieval torture device or writing manifestos about the digital colonization of his cardiovascular system. He is just a man. And in the genocentric economy of grievance, that means he is nothing. The lady doth protest too much, and she doth protest, and protest, and protest, and protest, until the word protest itself has been stripped mined of meaning, and the only thing left in the quarry is the echo of her own voice bouncing off the servers where her data is stored alongside mine and yours and Theodore's and every other breathing human who ever touched a screen. The app does not care about her gender. The algorithm does not know she is a woman. The data broker does not discriminate. The market is the most perfectly egalitarian institution ever devised by human intelligence. It exploits everyone with absolute indifference. To call this patriarchy is not merely false. It is a lie that dishonors every woman who ever faced genuine coercion, every man who ever built something of value, and every mind that ever attempted to reason clearly about the structure of reality. The chastity belt was a myth. The app is a tool. The essay is a spectacle. And the only prison being constructed here is one of words built by a woman who mistook her own rage for evidence and her own solipsism for philosophy. But words are not the only prison she builds. The essay pivots from surveillance mythology into something rawer, something that drops the academic mask and reveals the mechanism itself. A dinner party, a man named Theodore, a conversation that was never a conversation at all. What follows in the second half of her essay is the shit test elevated to social ritual, performed before witnesses over grain bowls while a golden retriever violates the charcuterie board in the background. Strip away the theoretical apparatus, the patriarchy, the extraction, the cyborg this and the digital that, and what remains is a woman who has converted her entire social existence into a tribunal where she is prosecutor, judge, jury, and executioner, and where the only crime is failing to kneel before the verdict was read. The dinner party Inquisition, female rage as shit test theater, and the abortion sacrament. The Spanish Inquisition at least had procedural rules. Torquemada gave you a judge, a cell, a hearing, corrupted, monstrous, bent, but a process nonetheless, a shadow of the natural law that even tyrants must invoke to legitimate their tyranny. The dinner party Inquisition, described in Cyborg Chastity, offers no such dignity. There is no judge because the Inquisitrix has already convicted you. There is no hearing because the verdict was rendered before you sat down. There is only the execution performed between the grain bowl and the pistachio cake, before a jury of charred fennel and a golden retriever performing unspeakable acts on the charcuterie board. Consider what actually happened to Theodore. A man asked a question about a current event. He expressed curiosity. He attempted dialogue, the basic currency of civilized discourse since Socrates first irritated the Athenians in the Agora. For this crime he was carved into conversational fillets by a woman who rehearsed her butcher's work, published it for thousands, and declared herself righteous in the doing. The medieval lord who locked the chastity belt was a monster. The dinner party inquisitor who locks a man's speech is a public intellectual. The belt was iron. The silence is progressive. Define the terms as the trivium demands. Inquisition, from the Latin inquisitio, a seeking, an inquiry, originally a neutral term of judicial procedure, before the Spanish crown weaponized it into an instrument of ideological enforcement. The dinner party Inquisition follows the same trajectory. Inquiry becomes weapon, question becomes trap, dialogue becomes confession extracted under duress. Theodore was never invited to speak, he was invited to submit. His question about period tracking apps was not a question, it was a loyalty oath, and Theodore failed it by answering honestly rather than reciting the catechism. Now watch the mechanism operate, she asks. He attempts to answer. She cuts him off. It isn't nuanced. He tries again. She cuts again. He points out that downloading an app involves choice. She sets down her fork. She tells us the clink was small and surgical, and Rideau finds consent so broadly that every human action short of retreat into the wilderness becomes proof of patriarchal coercion. By desert, Theodore has been tried, convicted, and sentenced to social death. His crime, not agreeing fast enough. This is not analysis. This is cluster B pathology performing itself in real time. The DSM-5 describes borderline personality disorder through 9 criteria: frantic efforts to avoid real or imagined abandonment, a pattern of unstable and intense interpersonal relationships, identity disturbance, impulsivity in at least two areas that are potentially self-damaging, recurrent suicidal behavior, or self-mutilation, affective instability due to marked reactivity of mood, chronic feelings of emptiness, inappropriate intense anger or difficulty controlling anger, and transient stress-related paranoid ideation. Read the essay, count the criteria. Our inquisitrix describes herself as living in permanent fury, confesses that rage has replaced whatever softer emotion she might once have possessed, constructs her entire identity around grievance against man, and experiences every social interaction as evidence of cosmic persecution. She is not writing political theory, she is presenting symptoms and calling it consciousness. The solipsism constitutes its own epistemology, a complete system of knowing that replaces the objective with the subjective, the universal with the personal, logos with pathos. Aristotle defined truth in the metaphysics to say of what is that it is, and of what is not that it is not. Truth is a statement about reality, independent of the speaker's emotional state. The inquisitrix operates by a different axiom: I feel, therefore the world has wronged me. Her fury proves her oppression. Her abortions prove systemic violence. Her discomfort at a dinner party proves civilizational misogyny. The self becomes the measure of all things, and the self is always, perpetually, theatrically, profitably wounded. Now watch this framework break apart due to its own logical failures. First argument: if patriarchy governs all female thinking and behavior, then no female thinking or behavior can be truly independent or freeing. The inquisitrix's essay is female thinking and behavior. Thus, by her own logic, her essay cannot be genuinely independent or freeing. Her opposition is itself created by the very system she opposes. Logical absurdity achieved. The framework destroys itself. Second argument: if agreement under conditions of radical information imbalance is not valid agreement, then nearly every human interaction lacks valid agreement. You purchased a vehicle with less knowledge of the engine than the seller possessed. You took employment without knowing the chief executive's future plans. You consumed the burnt fennel without awareness of what chemicals covered it. If information imbalance invalidates agreement, then Sierra's dinner gathering was itself a form of force, and the inquisitrix's presence demonstrated her own oppression. The meaning stretches until it consumes her freedom of choice alongside everyone else's. She confesses, perhaps without understanding what she has revealed, that rage has replaced whatever softer emotion she might once have been capable of. Read that sentence again. A human being has announced that her emotional repertoire has narrowed to a single note, and she has published this contraction as consciousness. This is not liberation. This is the clinical description of emotional calcification, the hardening of the soul's arteries. The medieval flagellant who whipped himself in his cell believed his suffering was sanctifying. The modern feminist who declares war on her own capacity for tenderness believes her fury is emancipatory. Both are prisoners. Both call their chains ornaments. Both are wrong. The abortion narratives illuminate the sacramental structure of modern feminism with terrible clarity. The first is described as emotionally inert, a phrase that should stop you cold. A woman ends a developing human life and reports the experience as inert, not sad, not conflicted, not even relieved. Inert, like a dentist's appointment, like renewing a parking permit. The capacity to kill one's own offspring and feel nothing. This is not strength. This is the death of the soul announcing itself through the death of feeling. The Greeks had a word for this, acedia, the noonday demon, the absence of care, the soul's refusal to inhabit its own life. The second abortion reveals the dark theology beneath. She chose to have sex. She chose not to use adequate contraception. She chose to terminate the pregnancy. She chose never to speak to the father again. Then she reframed every consequence of her own choices as male oppression. What do you want to do about it? The philosopher's question was basic respect for her agency. The inquisitrix heard it as the grammar of abandonment. He asked what she wanted. She heard, he wants me to decide so he can escape. The question honored her autonomy, the interpretation annihilated it. She cannot bear the weight of her own choices, so she transfers the burden to the nearest male. This is the projection mechanism in its purest crystalline form. And then the devastating theology, the world had not earned my motherhood. Consider what this claim requires. The world, all of creation, every living thing, the whole of being, exists to serve her reproductive decision-making. When the world fails to meet her standards, she punishes it by destroying her own child. This is narcissism elevated to cosmology. This is the inversion the old faiths warned about. Death reframed as liberation, sterility recast as empowerment, the sacrifice of the innocent reimagined as service to the self. The old religions taught that sacrifice meant offering something precious to something greater than yourself. The new religion teaches that sacrifice means destroying something innocent to serve yourself, and calling the bloodshed resistance. The philosophy graduate student, the father of the second extinguished child, committed the cardinal sin of asking her what she wanted. In a worldview where female agency is simultaneously absolute, she can terminate a life without consequence, and non-existent, she is oppressed by every system in existence. The man who honors that agency becomes the villain. He cannot win. Tell her what to do. You are a patriarch. Ask her what she wants. You are abandoning her. Offer support. You are performing care. Remain silent. You are complicit. This is not a moral framework. This is a guilt production engine, a perpetual motion machine designed to extract condemnation from any male action regardless of its content. The crossbody bag she carries everywhere, phone, keys, rage, is not armor. It is a portable prison, voluntarily shouldered, with the keys held by no one but herself. She has constructed a worldview in which every experience confirms her oppression, every male action proves extraction, every moment of peace signals that the enemy is merely regrouping. She carries her cell with her and calls it consciousness. She has locked herself in and blamed the locksmith. Theodore's actual crime, he asked a question. He attempted ordinary conversation. He treated a complex issue as if it might have more than one valid perspective, which under Kohlberg's stage 3 morality, the good girl, bad boy stage, is the gravest possible offense. Theodore is bad because he did not parrot the correct phrases. The philosopher is bad because he asked a question instead of issuing a decree. Men, as a category, are bad because they exist within proximity to her rage. There is no stage 4 reasoning here, no appeal to universal principles, no consideration of due process or proportionality or individual merit. There is only the primitive binary, with me or against me, submissive or toxic, reciting or heretical. Meanwhile, the genuine concerns she gestures toward the real privacy issues around fertility data, the actual corporate harvesting of user information, drown beneath the tsunami of her psychodrama. Flow did share health data with third parties. The FTC did take action in 2021, requiring explicit consent before sharing health information and mandating independent privacy reviews. These are real problems requiring real solutions, requiring real thinking, the kind that happens when you stop performing your wounds and start analyzing the world with the instruments the Western tradition bequeathed you. Logos, dialectic, the patient discipline of distinguishing what is true from what merely feels true. And while the Inquisitrix manufactures oppression from dinner party conversation, consider what actual systemic suffering looks like. Men account for 78% of all suicides in the United States, roughly 4 times the female rate, year after year after year, and no fertility app tracks that data because nobody profits from male despair. Fathers receive sole custody in approximately 18% of contested family court cases. Men are the only demographic that pays more in lifetime taxes than it receives in government benefits. A study published by the National Academy of Sciences confirmed what every working man already knows. He is the net taxpayer, she is the net recipient, and the system he funds is called his oppression of her. The real chastity belt is not algorithmic. The real chastity belt is the lie that men are the oppressors while women collect the proceeds. The world is not at war with her. The world, for the most part, is not thinking about her at all. And that, not patriarchy, not surveillance, not algorithms, not Chase and Bryce in their Silicon Valley cubicles, is the wound she cannot forgive. Consider what you have just witnessed. A grown woman downloaded a free application of her own volition with her own finger on her own phone, purchased with her own money, and then composed several thousand words declaring herself a political prisoner of an invisible patriarchal gulag. She input her own data into her own device and called it slavery. This is not consciousness raising. This is a toddler who asked for ice cream, received ice cream, ate the ice cream, and then published a manifesto about how the ice cream colonized her digestive tract. The Soviets had gulags. The Viet Cong had tiger cages. The feminist has a push notification that says you're doing great, queen. Now apply the syllogism that annihilates every word she wrote. And notice how simple it is. If women possess sufficient agency to author feminist theory, occupy university chairs, organize political movements, terminate pregnancies at will, publish essays in national outlets, humiliate men at dinner parties, and demand the fundamental restructuring of Western civilization, then women possess sufficient agency to decide whether or not to download a fertility tracking application. Our author cannot simultaneously be a liberated political agent, capable of exposing invisible systems of oppression, and a helpless puppet manipulated by algorithms written by someone named Chase. The law of non-contradiction does not care about her feelings. Pick one. You cannot have both. The framework devours itself like Ouroboros swallowing its own tail, except Ouroboros at least had the dignity to finish the job. Now look at what she confessed to you, perhaps without realizing it, because confession is what happens when the soul demands truth even as the ego constructs lies. She told you she aborted 2 children and felt nothing. She told you that rage has replaced whatever capacity for tenderness she once possessed, her words, not mine. She told you she attends dinner parties not to enjoy food, not to enjoy company, not to enjoy the company of friends, but to perform ideological combat against men whose only crime was attempting pleasant conversation over organic wine. She carries her armor and archive in a crossbody bag because she has made herself so hostile to human connection that she requires protective equipment to survive a Saturday evening. A Roman legionary wore less armor crossing the Rhine, and she calls this liberation. Call it what it is, a prison cell she welded shut from the inside, then mailed the key to Facebook. I have walked you through the etymology of her lies, chastity from castus, meaning religious purity, not software terms of service. I have demonstrated the logic of her refutation. Voluntary tool usage cannot be coerced subjugation without destroying the concept of agency entirely, and with it, any claim to feminist political action. I have exposed the rhetoric of her manipulation. Every paragraph relies on emotional terrorism, abortion trauma weaponized as argument, dinner party, humiliation staged as political strategy. I have shown you the gamma bias that renders invisible the 24,000 men who kill themselves annually, the 85% of homeless who are male, the 90% of workplace deaths carried by men's bodies, the family courts that strip fathers of children on unsubstantiated allegations, the police who arrest a man in every domestic dispute regardless of who called, who bled, who threw what, while essays like this one complain that a fertility app sent a motivational notification. The narcissism is not a bug. It is the entire operating system. You are now inoculated. You have seen the machinery behind the curtain, and unlike Dorothy's wizard, this one has no voice, just resentment amplified through academic jargon. When the next HR struggle session demands your confession of privilege, when the next dinner party becomes an inquisition, when the next essay compares a tampon commercial to the Holocaust, you will recognize the pattern. The shit test dressed as scholarship. The cry for help disguised as a battle cry. The void where a soul should be screaming that the world is dark and blaming men for the absence of light she refuses to kindle. You will refuse the frame. You will not explain, apologize, justify, or submit. You will stand in the tradition of every man who built the civilization these ingrates inherit, while denouncing its architects, the aqueducts, the legal codes, the hospitals, the universities, the electricity grids, The sewage systems, the agriculture that feeds them, the pharmaceuticals that enable their birth control, the surgical techniques that perform their abortions safely, the very internet on which they publish their complaints about how men have provided them nothing. Aristotle built the logic they abuse. Aquinas built the natural law they deny. The cathedral builders, the shipwrights, the bridge engineers, the farmers who fed cities of millions, they did not ask for gratitude. They asked only to build, and build they did. The West rose on logos, reason, truth, the word made flesh, and it will not fall because a woman with a gender studies degree compared her iPhone to iron underwear. Go forth, speak what you know. Plant seeds in every conversation, every comment thread, every workplace, every dinner party, where some Theodore sits silently recording his own demoralization. You are not alone. You were never alone. You are the inheritor of the greatest civilization in human history, and you have just been handed back the keys to your own mind. Use them. And now the sponsored book introduction, HR Struggle Sessions, Karen's Cultural Revolution, Enforcing Feminization and Communism in Corporations. You know the moment, the one where you're sitting in a meeting, minding your own business, and someone, usually a woman, starts crying because you used the word guys to address the team. No warning, no logic. Just emotion launched like a missile, and suddenly you're the problem. You didn't shout, you didn't threaten. You said guys. But now HR is in your inbox, your manager is avoiding eye contact, and you're being told to reflect on how your language made others feel. That's not human resources, that's human repression. And it's happening in every corporation, every school, every government office, and it's destroying men's lives one silent compliance at a time. I've lived it. I've been accused of microaggressions for walking into a room too confidently. I've been reported for toxic masculinity because I disagreed with a female colleague's idea politely. I've watched men twice as competent as their female peers passed over for promotions because they didn't show enough empathy. I've seen good men broken by HR struggle sessions disguised as feedback circles, where the goal isn't improvement, it's humiliation. And I've realized something terrifying. This isn't a glitch in the system. It's the system. It was designed this way, and is working exactly as intended to erode male identity, to punish competence, to elevate emotion over reason, and to install a new genocratic order under the guise of equity and inclusion. This book is not for everyone. If you're a woman who believes men need to be softened, silenced, and managed, close this book now. Go back to your yoga class, your true crime podcast, or your DEI training webinar. This isn't for you. If you're a man who still thinks merit matters, who still believes in logic, truth, and personal responsibility, then you're in the minority and you're in danger, but you're also exactly who I wrote this for. You're the man who feels the ground shifting beneath you, but can't explain why. You're the one who senses the ideological possession infecting every institution, turning once rational workplaces into emotional battlegrounds run by women and their male enablers. You're the one who still remembers what it meant to be a man before they pathologized strength, criminalized confidence, and redefined masculinity as a public health hazard. What you're about to read is not theory. It's autopsy. I dissect how HR became the new Inquisition, how family courts operate as feminist tribunals, how language has been weaponized to silence dissent, and how the entire DEI industrial complex is built on the psychological infrastructure of female hypergamy and maternal collectivism. I trace how leftist ideology isn't some abstract political movement. It's the maternal instinct gone feral, splitting the world into infants, women and children who deserve endless care, and predators, men who must be taxed, shamed, and controlled. I expose how diversity means female supremacy, how inclusion means excluding men who speak honestly, and how equity is just tyranny with a smiley face. This book walks you through the feminist capture of medicine, the war on fatherhood, the death of due process, and the rise of the gossip network, the invisible web of female social enforcement that punishes men for existing too boldly. If you want to understand why your company promotes the loudest complainer instead of the hardest worker, why men are disappearing from leadership, why speaking truth is now a fireable offense, and why Western civilization is collapsing under the weight of female emotional logic, this book will show you. Not with rage, not with whining, with analysis, with evidence, with clarity. I've studied the trivium. I respect the transcendentals. I love the Western canon, and I see exactly how it's being burned down by a coalition of women, leftist ideologues, and cucked men who'd rather please than lead. This is not a self-help book. It's a survival manual. It's for men who are red-pilled, who see the matrix, and who refuse to pretend anymore. If you're tired of being gaslit, punished for existing, and treated like a second-class citizen in your own life, read this. But if you're comfortable with the new normal, if you believe men need to be fixed, if you think feminism is about equality, then walk away. This book will not comfort you. It will not validate your delusions. It will expose them. And that's the point. HR Struggle Sessions, Karen's Cultural Revolution, Enforcing Feminization and Communism in Corporations. Written by Conrad Reicher. Buy now, links in description.